today are just a certain type of customer. I like to call them the EDC guys, and just kind of give you guys some ideas about certain types of customers that you're going to see out there if you start knife sharpening. And in my experience over the last several years, your most discerning customers are what I call the EDC guys. These are serious pocket knife owners, collectors, who spend a lot of money on expensive EDCs. A lot of times they end up trying to sharpen their own knives, and sometimes they really butcher them, and you sometimes get their stuff because they come to you to fix it. Sometimes they just outright know that there's people that are probably better at sharpening than they are, and they don't want to be bothered, so they just send the stuff out. Now, when I first got into sharpening, I actually thought, I thought chefs were going to be my most discerning customers, and that would be picky about their knives and how they are. And I was completely wrong on that. Chefs just want a really sharp knife, and they treat their knives, for the most part, like hammers. But your EDC guys treat their knives more like a surgical scalpel. These are guys that are really into their knives. They want them to look beautiful. They want them to be perfect. They want them to be incredibly sharp. So this is your customer that you really got to be sure that you please, because if there's someone who's also going to maybe give you a bad review, especially if you really butcher one of their knives, it's going to be an EDC lover. So this is this is the kind of thing, this is an example I'm going to show you. This is the kind of thing these guys do. So before you start taking on EDC guys, here's a couple things I would recommend. One, if you're concerned about sharpening EDCs, for one, start doing some of your own. If you don't own any, one thing that you can do, if you go on eBay, is a great place to get them. If you look under TSA bulk confiscated knives, you will find that the TSA will sell tons and tons and tons of knives in bulk, where you can get 100 EDCs, and they're a mixed batch, and they might be a little bit, you might get a Benchmade in there that's worth what you paid for the entire lot, or they might be all a bunch of junky little, $20, $30 knives. They might be lower end knives, and that's the way the EDC world is. And those of you, this is a Kershaw knife, but this is a pretty nice Kershaw knife. But Kershaws can range from 30 into the hundreds of dollars depending on the knife, where your Benchmades are usually you see very few under $150. This is a pretty nice one. It's brand new, and this is another kind of thing that EDC guys will do. So a lot of times they're not happy with the factory edge, and if they know they have a good sharpener, they might send you a brand new knife to sharpen. And that's what this is a birthday present for one of my really good customers named Joe's brother, and he wants me to sharpen this recurve Kershaw, which is a Ken Onion design, and change its geometry. He sent a very specific letter saying, I want this ground to a 15-degree bevel with a 20-degree micro-bevel. So that's what I'm going to do for him here. Now, one of the things that people ask all the time also, that I always get questions are, is what is your favorite sharpening? And people know, if you watch my channel, I don't have just one sharpening device. I have multiple. So I have multiple Tormex. I have multiple 1x30s. I have a 2x42. I have a Wicked Edge. I have, lots of things around the shop. I have a Ken Onion Elite sharpener. Lots of things that you can use to sharpen. But when it comes to doing really high-end stuff, or stuff that I know the customer's really going to be discerning about the quality of what they're getting back, my go-to is always my Tormek. So high-end Japanese knives, Tormek. EDCs, my Tormek. Now, why is that? Well, one, I like the speed it operates at. I have very good control. I never have to be concerned about removing too much metal from someplace that I don't want to, which is all things that can happen more easily, in my opinion, when you're on a 1x30 or when you're on a 2x42, or if you're working at higher speeds. At just 90 RPMs, you have a lot of control with the Tormek. Now, one thing that's a little different that you guys sometimes see on mine too is sometimes I grind in water, sometimes I grind dry on CBN wheels. So this is a 200 grit CBN, this is a 1000 grit CBN over here. One of the times I like to grind dry is when I'm doing high-end EDCs. Now that might surprise some people. I'm not concerned about the heat, I'm not concerned about the dust because I'm going to wear a mask anyway, but the reason I like to wear, or the reason I like to do it on a CBN wheel with no water is because, one, I like the feel, but I really like how well I can see what's going on. So even when I'm grinding in water on the Tormek, the water is somewhat of a slight visual distraction. So when I'm doing something that I know I want to be perfect, I'll actually do it dry. So that's why today I'm going to do these completely dry on these CBN wheels. So I won't need any of these the troughs or anything like that. There won't be any water in them, and that's what I'm going to do. So let's get started. I'm going to get started on this Kershaw, and I'll show you just my normal process with it. Okay, so let's start with the very first thing that you're going to have to do, which is I got to put this EDC in my jig. Now, this is a recurve, so the best way to do this, in my opinion, is you take the tip and the end, and if you imagined a straight line going through from that tip to the end, and this is almost on all EDCs, that's the angle you want this clamped at. And another interesting thing that I'll show you is on a lot of knives, this one is a perfect example of it. See this flat area up top, and it has a design where this large bevel was cut in? A lot of times you can line up right on that. Sometimes it's absolutely perfect with the angle that you need. This time it doesn't look absolutely perfect to me. It looks like, because of it being a recurve, I think I'm going to have to go a little bit more of an angle, but not much. I mean, it's really close. So you see what I'm doing. So I'm taking, like, if I had an imaginary line going from here to the tip, I want this on that line, as close as I can get it. And what that's going to do is that's going to make your bevel the most even across the whole knife. Because if you did it flat, and if you don't go tip to tip, you're going to come up with an area where it might be very obvious that you don't have an even bevel. Now, what's the next thing I have to do? Well, he wants a 15-degree bevel with a 20-degree micro-bevel put on this. So the first thing I'm going to do is I am going to blacken in with my Sharpie this side. I'm actually going to do both sides because I want to know exactly where it's removing from when I'm working on it. So right now I'm going to do the 15-degree bevel, primary bevel, and then we'll worry about the micro bevel after we reprofile this to the 15 degrees that he's asking for. So I'm going to use my Tormek jig to get this to 15 degrees. So I have it set at 15. I have this over here, which is on 10 inches, which is the size of my CBN wheels. So I'm going to come up here, and the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to just do a slight test pull, and I want to see how much am I going to have to take off to get that 15 degrees. And it's a good bit. So let me show you. Well, actually, we didn't check first we got to make sure we have 15 degrees. And sometimes it does help to get down on the side when you're dealing with something like this. And really, really look closely. Because remember, it's a tiny, tiny bevel that's there. So we could come up a tiny bit. Because I really want to remove as little metal as possible to meet what he's asking to have done here. And this is probably the hardest part, is making these adjustments, but as time goes on, you will learn to do it pretty quickly. And when it's, yeah, that's pretty good. That looks pretty good right there. So now I'm going to check to see where it's removing from. And because this is a recurve, I'm going to check in a couple different spots. I'm going to check on the shallow end of the recurve. I'm going to check up here at the high point and also the tip, because that's going to give me some ideas to how much I have to work on certain spots to recut that bevel. So that's going to be a pretty decent amount of material that's going to have to come off to give this that 15 degree bevel. Yeah, so, and I'm going to show you why I'm saying that. So if you look, let's see how close we can get. Most of the material that has come off very high up. It's not at the apex. So I got to grind a lot of metal away to get that down to 15 degrees. So, you know, personally, it's not something that I would do, but these are the kind of requests you get from the EDC owners. So let's get started, and I'll get moving on this knife. So another really important thing is I do have a special light in here that I use when I work on EDCs. Gives me a lot of extra light on here. Being able to see, super important. You want to see what you're working on. Let me show you guys real quick where we're at, so you can see where the material's starting to come off from. So the tip's going to need a little more work, but hopefully you guys can see too. Like, I can really see really well what's going on here. And the other thing I wanted to talk about is, see if I can explain this exactly how I want to explain it. So wherever I'm starting at, you want to imagine like a straight line. And some guys will even go as far as to they'll take that same line that I talked to you about from the tip to the heel, and they will even project that a straight line across with a laser on the wheel. I've seen that done before. Now I just do it with my mind's eye. I just imagine like, okay, if I had a line that was running as close across, I want to keep this blade as much on the same line. Maybe that makes sense. So where I start here, I want to try and get the tip also as close to that same line. So you see, like, I'm following the curve, and it reaches a point when you're dealing with a really curved knife, like a recurve, where obviously you're not going to be able to. You want it as close as possible, and that being as close as you possibly can with that is what will help you keep a nice even bevel. Because on this recurve, you know, we also want to be sure that we're keeping the recurve. And if we do too much, you know, we don't want to take that out. We want to be sure that we're keeping that recurve and keeping everything looking nice. So yeah, so I'm liking what I see here. From here to there. It's a little fat. So I marked where I want to remove some, because I still need to take off some from the other side to keep this nice and even. And I need to do that on this side, not on this side. So those marks are just going to help me line up with where I need to work on this side. All right. So I need to remove just from those areas. So it's going to be this side. And I really just want to work that middle portion of the knife. I'm just now seeing a burr starting to rise. So that's good. Yep. Okay, so now I'm going to finish with just two nice complete long strokes so that everything bevel wise looks the same, and then I am ready to go to my next grit. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take my angle guide off. I'm going to move it to my other machine. Alright, so now this is just, I'm going to continue on so that was 5. I'm going to continue sharpening, but now I'm going to, this is more now making it look nice, getting that bevel good, and the 20-degree micro bevel I'll show you will be at the very end, and that will not be real difficult. It's in general what we're going to end up doing for the most part is raising this, and from experience in the past I've always found it's generally around 7 full turns, but you know, that's, like I said, generally. And now I'm getting to where I want to thin out this front tip a little bit more than I'm getting out of it, so I'm actually just adding just a tiny bit of finger pressure. Alright, so now what we're going to do, now I'm going to do my 20-degree micro-bevel. Typically, what I know from experience in the past, about 7 turns. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And I think that's a little high. I'm going to come down 2 full turns. It was a tiny bit high. Yeah. That's much more in the ballpark. I'm even going to come down just 1 turn. Yeah. And that's good. Alright. So I am going to mark again with a marker. So a micro bevel, if this is new to you and you don't know what it is, it's when you put an additional bevel at the very edge of the knife that's different angle than your other ones. So can you guys see that? So it's very, very small. It's not even going to be something you're going to see very easily. You can see that little bit of shine there. So now I'm also going to be counting my strokes on each side and trying to get everything nice and even and everything looking really, really good. Now I'm going to show you what that looks like under the scope so that you guys can see what I did. Then I'll hone and polish and clean up everything will be next. Alright, so here's the scope. Okay, so you guys see, here is what's going on here. So we have our 15-degree bevel, and then that, starting that little shadow going all the way down to that apex. So just that little area right there, that is the micro bevel that I just cut into this knife. Here's my leather wheel. Okay, let's do a little cut test. You guys see that? I'll show you again. Oh yeah. I'm barely even applying pressure. It's just going right through that. Yeah, it is wicked sharp. The power of micro bevels. Look at that. Yeah, that is wicked sharp. It looks great. So now what I'm going to do, I am going to hit this with one of my favorite products, which is for EDC knives, and it's Flint's matte finish. And I love this for black knives, tactical knives, knives that you don't want being super shiny. So even like this with these parkerized finished knives, I just find this stuff works great. So I like to spray this on there, and it just does a really nice job. You get a nice clean towel. Let that sit on there for a second. And then I'm going to wipe that off. And we are good to go. And that is how I like to do EDCs, and why I like to use the Tormek for EDCs and some of the more difficult stuff like a recurve knife.